had many guests on my show, and many of them speak about near-death experiences and other various subjects as it relates to spirituality. And today's guest, a special guest, who was 98 years old this past August, was born in Breslau, Germany on August 2nd, 1925. Since the family was Jewish, his father's sporting goods store was boycotted by the Nazis and eventually sold. On October 1938, he and his family managed to escape to the United States via Holland, just 1 week before Kristallnacht. In 1943, drafted into the U.S. Army, where he served in an intelligence unit. Let's welcome today's guest, Colonel Franz Cohn. Thank you.
I was born in 1925, and I was born into a pretty well-to-do middle-class family in Germany. They were doing quite well. They had a sporting goods store, and they had a live-in maid. And when I came along, they hired another girl to take care of me. So it's obvious that they were very comfortable, and they could do whatever they wanted to do because I was being taken care of. But it didn't take long for things to start changing in terms of dark clouds starting to come about as the 1930s approached. And the worst thing that had happened was that my mother's sister, her husband, lived in Chemnitz, a different city than we did. And he was accosted on the streets by some stormtroopers who suspected he was Jewish. And when they confirmed it, they killed him. Now, this, of course, was not a story to tell the kids, but a boy at about 5 or 6 years old starts to listen, and he draws his own conclusions. And one of the big conclusions was that Nazis were dangerous and Nazis had to be worried about. And you were never going to be a friend of the Nazis. And you knew that. And that got reinforced when I was able to look out of the window of our apartment. Across the street was a finance office. And that finance office seemed to draw protesters. And my parents explained to me when we all saw two groups fighting each other that one group was communists and the other group was Nazis, and that we really didn't hold to either one of those groups. And we should be very, very careful in dealing with either one of them. So I was all prepared in terms of worrying about Nazis when they came to power in 1934.
Yeah.
Now, I started school, of course, a little earlier than that. And when I look back, the first grade teacher, I can't remember much about him. He was old. He was at least 50 years old. But the second grade teacher came in, and he was a young fellow, and he was very energetic, and he was very likable. And I really liked the guy. His name was Herr Schubert, and when I heard that Herr Schubert was coming back for us for the third grade, I was all excited, and I was waiting for Herr Schubert to come in. And when he did, he came in full Nazi uniform. I was devastated. This guy was suddenly not my friend, but my enemy. I realized that immediately. And of course, things changed in the class also. The kids started to bring to school items of their Hitler Youth uniform. So they came with various paraphernalia, caps or belts or buckles and brown shirts and whatnot. And then they started to sing their Nazi songs. And when they did, they had to stand up. But I was told, you're not allowed to sing Nazi songs. You're Jewish. You have to stay seated. Well, the kid who stays seated while everybody gets up, it's not going to be a very popular kid. And so I wasn't. but I will tell at least that Herr Schumann, Herr Schubert would keep order in his classroom, and when they start picking on me, he wouldn't allow it. He didn't want to have any trouble in the classroom. So at least in the classroom, I was safe. But after school, they started to put the word out I was Jewish. And there's one incident, they started to chase me, yelling, Jew boy, Jew boy. And luckily, I was fast enough to evade them. And I got home, I told my parents, and they said, we'll take care of it. And they took me out of the German public school and put me into the Jewish private school. So in 4th grade, I was in a Jewish private school. And that was a with boys and girls. And I was much more comfortable, of course, in there. And I remember the names of some of the kids. I don't remember names of any of the German kids. And I don't remember the names of any of the girls in the Jewish school either. But I do remember particularly the ones who were on my soccer team. And the funny thing is, we had, I think it was 5 Cohns, C-O-H-N, all of them, not C-O-H-E-N. The German was C-O-H-N. And none of us were related, but there they were. So I remember them, and I remember some of the others as well. And I was very happy with my soccer team. Now, as time went along, 1935, the laws were changed, and there was a requirement to stay segregated between the Aryans and the Jews. There was to be no intercourse one way or the other. And we, in our soccer team, of course, was all Jewish, and we could only play Jewish teams. That's how the segregation worked. Benches. Once in a while, there was a bench for a Jew, but all the other benches were not allowed for Jews. They were all for Aryans. So everything was very embarrassing when you went out into the world. And we, on the other hand, kept pretty well among ourselves, and we were comfortable among ourselves. It was only when we went outside that we were not comfortable. Well, things went along until first of all, in 1933, when Hitler came to power, there was an immediate demonstration against my father's store being owned by a Jew. Nazi stormtroopers were in front of the store with signs indicating don't buy from Jews. Well, my father saw the handwriting on the wall, and he sold that store as quickly as he could, and he got still pretty good money for it. And it was a very lucky thing that he sold it, because the store could have been an anchor and could have delayed our departure when it was absolutely necessary. So even though at the time it seemed like a tragedy, it was really a good omen for us. But we didn't know that. But by 1938, my father had run out of money. Now, that was, I became 13 in 1938, to my bar mitzvah, and we had a wonderful celebration. I did my thing in the synagogue, and when I came home, I had all kinds of presents. I had a BMW bicycle. I really loved that. And goodness, I don't know how many pen and pencil sets I received, because people don't know what to give pen and pencil set. It seemed like a good idea. Anyway, as soon as the bar mitzvah was over, my father came to me and said, I have a problem here. I can't support the family anymore. I have some distant relatives in the United States, and I'm going to, this was 1938, and the waiting time was about 5 years. So you can see where that would have put us. But we didn't know that. And my father made all kinds of arrangements in advance, which he could, passage for his trip, hotel reservations and such, all could be done in Germany in advance of his trip. But all he could take with him as a visitor was 10 marks and one suitcase. And 10 marks is nothing, really. It wasn't even $10. Anyway, he took off and he wrote back. He found his relatives, but of course, at this time, in 1938, was a depression in the United States, and they were not in a financial condition to give them an affidavit, because the affidavit indicates that that person who receives the affidavit will not become a burden to the government, which in terms means they have to be supported by the person who executes the affidavit. And they were not in a condition to do it. That seemed, again, like a calamity. And again, it was a lifesaver, because while my father stayed longer to find someone to give him an affidavit, the Gestapo, there were 2 Gestapo agents that came to our door looking for my father. And my mother had told them that he was on an international business trip, and she was told in turn, the minute he returns, he must report to Gestapo headquarters. Well, that was a red line that even I understood, because there was a business friend of my parents by the name of Michaelis, who about a year before had been advised to report to Gestapo headquarters. And about 3-4 hours later, they found him on the sidewalk in front of the Gestapo headquarters. He had either been pushed or jumped out of a 3rd-story window. And that came to mind immediately. And my mother immediately wrote my father in some ways, because she was afraid the man might be monitored, that he has to stay where he is and not come home. In any event, my mother now faced a real dilemma. What was she going to do? Another thing happened at that point. All the passports of Jews were being collected to be stamped with a big J. Now, that was not actually at the behest of the Nazis. That was at the behest of the Swiss government. They wanted to see when people came over if they were refugees or if they were legitimate visitors. And with the J, they knew these were refugees. And that's what they wanted. And the Germans were willing to accommodate them in that respect. Anyway, my mother thought the next thing would be the confiscation of the passport. So she went to the American consulate and got herself a visitor's visa. She was lucky that they did not have computers in those days, because if they had recognized that my father was already in country, she would never have gotten the visa, because she wouldn't have been a visitor. She would have been a refugee, obviously.
Right.
But completely out of character, she went back the next day and bribed a German official to extend the visa to me as well, which was easy because I was on my mother's passport. So one passport, the 2 of us, one visa for the 2 of us. And well, another thing I should have told you, that a couple of days after the Gestapo, a woman who said she was British came to our door, and she had an official document that required us to give her a bedroom. And we did that. And my mother told me that this was a Gestapo informant, that I have to be very careful what I say while I'm in the apartment. And if we have anything to say to each other, we would have to take a walk outside and discuss it outside. And when she said, let's take a walk, I knew it was going to be serious. So we went outside, and she turned to me and said, should we go? Now, that was a rough question for a 13-year-old. I was well anchored in the Jewish community in Breslau. I was on my soccer team. I had all my friends. I had my stamp collection. I had my BMW bike. Uh, but I knew we were not wanted in that state. And I went and I said to her, let's go. And that was probably the smartest thing I ever did in my life.
Yeah.
Because a 13-year-old kid can put all kinds of obstacles in the course of any plans that my mother might have. But no, I was quite willing. And I had one more soccer game to play. I went out and I helped them lose. I was distracted. And at the end, I said, see you next time. But I knew there was not going to be a next time. And I never, ever saw any of those kids, nor heard of them ever again. That was the end of my relationship with the Jewish community in Germany. And the next morning, my mother again had made all kinds of advance arrangements. She had given us first class passage on the Staatendamm, the Holland America line, the steamer. And she had 2 weeks of first class hotel reservations in New York. But all we took was again 10 marks and one suitcase each. And then at 5 o'clock in the morning, we snuck out of that apartment. By the way, the lady really was British, and she offered to give me English lessons, and I took 2 of them. And I never realized at the time how important they were going to be. But I had 2 English lessons when I left Germany. Well, we got on a train to Berlin, and there she said goodbye to her father. Her father was going to be in the concentration camp after Crystal Night, and he didn't survive. He died in there. So she never was going to see him again. And she said goodbye to her oldest sister who lived in Berlin with her family. And they were able to escape to Australia. But Australia was so far, so she never saw her again either. In any event, she said goodbye. We got on a train for Amsterdam. And when we went across the border, you could see the sigh of relief that came over my mother's breath there. And the question was, could we ever come back, really? And that was a question that hung in the background, but I was too young to worry about stuff like that. So off we went to Amsterdam, and there she saw the banker Rothschild. And he was in the line of refugees, and he provided money to refugees. And she received money, and it must have been a substantial sum. And damn me, I never asked her how much she got. So I don't know how much she got, but it must have been a good sum. And my cousin, well, actually, it was my mother's cousin, Josephson. Kurt Josephson was his wife, Fanny, and his son, David, who was my age. They had fled from Germany to Holland, which was not a good place to flee to, because when the Germans moved into Holland, they ended up in a concentration camp. The kid was placed on a field with 100 other Jewish kids. They didn't give him any shelter. They didn't give him any food. And one after another died right there on that field. And the big amazing thing was that both Kurt and Fanny, who was very, very weak lady, they both survived the concentration camps, but they survived it physically, not mentally. Yeah. And they've had problems after. Well, anyway, this was not known by us, of course, and we said goodbye to them, got on a train to Rotterdam, got on a boat, and I had a terrific first-class voyage on the Staatendamm, and I lived it up. I was almost the ping pong champion, but when men beat me, I wasn't. Anyway, but my mother didn't have such a good trip because she knew about Ellis Island. And Ellis Island, if they could find out that my father was in country, they would have placed us on a boat going back the next day. So that is what she was worried about. Me, I was not worried about anything except I wanted to see the skyscrapers in New York and the Statue of Liberty, which my gym teacher had told me about. And when we started to approach the harbor of New York, I was up on top looking, and sure enough, there was a skyline, and I took a picture of that, and there was a Statue of Liberty, and I understood what that meant also, and I was all enthused. And my mother was real concerned, more so than ever, because it's getting close. And then suddenly, a big surprise. First class passengers were invited to go through customs immediately onto the dock. They did not have to go to Ellis Island. Everybody else had to go to Ellis Island. Money talks. And there was a big relief on part of my mother. And of course, we had a happy reunion with my father. And it was the 30th of October, 1938, when we got off the boat in New York. And there was still another worry. My father told my mother, and I overheard what the situation was, that we were at the mercy of the relief organizations. And they indicated that they would provide relief until he got an affidavit. The minute he got an affidavit, their relief assistance would stop, and we would have to go back to Germany to wait for the affidavit. Well, none of that could have possibly developed. And we knew that at that time because the Gestapo had his name already. And if he had can't come back, he'd have been arrested immediately. And God knows what would happen to us, probably in a concentration camp. But again, it wasn't me who was worrying about it. It was my parents. Me, I was all hopped up. I went into that hotel, and the elevator operator allowed me to get that fast elevator that you had to do it just right to stop at the floor. And of course, when he gave it to me, I would be up to down, and the supervisor recognized something was going wrong there. And when we came down, my elevator operator got scolded, and he had to stop helping, letting me move that elevator. Anyway, I knew I wasn't going to be an elevator operator later in life. I learned that lesson. And but those two lessons of English did help in those first few days. And but my parents were terribly worried. Now, we had come in on the 30th of October. On the 9th of November was Crystal Night. Crystal Night, of course, was the pogrom by the Germans against the Jews. It was a pre-planned operation, and they were just waiting for the right incident. And the incident was when a French Jewish student shot a member of the Paris German embassy, and that was the reason that they implemented the pogrom. And Crystal Night came, and the remaining Jewish stores were smashed. The synagogues were burned, and all the males that they could get their hands on were placed in concentration camps, and they were levied a fee to compensate for all the damage that had been caused by others, of course. Anyway, we were very concerned about our relatives in Germany, as everybody else was, and it hit all the papers. And the strange thing was that this catastrophe saved us because President Roosevelt issued an executive order that stated that no one in country would be forced to return to Germany. Visas were extended indefinitely, and we were definitely saved. Wow. And that sort of ended the escape story. Now, my father had gotten a sublet room from a Greek family When our 2 weeks of hotel reservation expired, we moved into this one room for the three of us with kitchen privileges. And the Greek people were very nice to us, but it was certainly cramped. And I knew this was a transitory type of thing. I knew things were going to get better. And I was enrolled into a junior high school, seventh grade. I had left seventh grade. I was back in seventh grade. And believe it or not, they put me in a rapid class, which was supposed to be for advanced students. And I was advanced in terms of arithmetic, for example. I was way ahead, but certainly not in English. And I found that out the first day. The teacher turned to me and said, take the waste paper basket and bring it around and collect the trash. And she was looking at the window. I had no idea what she was talking about. But looking at the window, I thought, she wants me to open the window. So I go open the window. Of course, all the kids laugh. You hear the kid opens the window when he's supposed to collect the trash. Well, that certainly gave me an incentive to learn English as quickly as possible because I didn't want to be laughed at. I was again an outcast, almost like in Germany, except there wasn't any hate involved. It was fun in a way, but not fun for me. Anyway, the teachers helped me. They annotated magazines with the name of the item on a picture, and I listened to the radio. Now, the radio was very difficult because I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know the story, but I got the intonations. And one thing I wanted to avoid was a heavy German accent. I didn't want that. And listening to the radio, I could imitate the English the way it was spoken. And I never got the German accent that way. But what really helped me was the movies, because in the movies you could see what was going on and you could understand the plot even if you didn't hear all the words correctly and didn't understand all the words correctly. And that helped me get over the hump. Now, junior high school was difficult because I had been identified as a different type of kid, and there was another kid from Austria, and the two of us were in that class, so we coordinated pretty well. But we were really never completely accepted until, I guess, the end of it. There was a little gal, a little Irish girl, Mary Cavanaugh. I still remember her name. Wow. She came to me and said, you're good in math, and I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? I was in heaven. Somebody asked me for help, and here I could give it to her. And I was really riding high. Oh boy, oh boy. That really boosted my ego. And then when I get to high school, things were different because my English was good enough. There was no great accent. I was not separated in any way. I integrated into the high school, and I had a good high school career that way. Now, during high school, of course, the war started in Europe, and well, most people were not happy with that, but I was, because I thought, well, maybe Britain is going to be able to get over Hitler and beat him and kill this Nazi infection in Germany. Of course, we didn't know how things got even worse for the Jews because we really had no communication with the people who were left in Germany. We communicated with the people who escaped, and there were 7 countries that were involved in the escape of our family. But we were afraid to write to the people in Germany and cause them possible trouble that way, that they had lines open with foreigners and such. So we were very careful not writing to them, only to those who had escaped. And one other thing that I should tell, after school, there were abilities for after school activities. And a junior high school, I was in high school, and my friend Paul was in high school. But the two of us went to the after school activities in the junior high school because they had ping pong there. And we played ping pong with two girls, and one we called Ping and one we called Pong. Well, I like Pong. What I didn't know, that Pung was the girl I was going to marry about, a number of years later.
Wow.
But I didn't know that, of course. And I had a little bit of date with her. We went to a movie together, aside from ping pong. And, but, uh, you know, the Army started to call me. And when Pearl Harbor started, I recall I was 16 years old. I was outside. It was a cold but nice, beautiful, sunny day. Somebody came running up the street saying, "The Japs just bombed Pearl Harbor." Pearl Harbor? What's Pearl Harbor? I had no idea. Well, after a while, somebody came up. That's Hawaii. We were at war. And a couple of days later, we declared war against Germany. And again, I was probably one of the few who were happy to have heard that, because I thought now Germany is definitely not going to be able to win, since we're going to be involved in the war. And but the war, well, it has nothing to do with me. I'm 16 years old. So, well, it didn't take too long till I realized, whoops, it will have something to do, because this war is going slower than I thought it would go. And sure enough, when 1943 came and I was 18 years old in August, I celebrated my birthday in August, and in September, I was drafted. Now, well, okay. So in the Army, I go to Fort Dix, the reception center, and everybody is there for about 3 days where they process you, give you a uniform, shots, then you see 2 movies, and then you get orders for basic training. Everybody got orders for basic training except me. So I went to my sergeant, I remember his name, Sergeant Chereau. He was an American Indian. And Chereau said, "Well, let me take a look. Why you don't get orders?" And he came back. He said, "Well, you're an enemy alien." I'd never heard that term, enemy alien. "Well, what do you mean I'm an enemy alien?" "Well, you were born in Germany. Your last passport was German. Uh, uh, there was no indication that you became an American in any way. Uh, and you're actually on a temporary basis here, but we could draft you, but you could have said you didn't want to be drafted." Well, I never even thought of that. Anyway, so what will happen? Well, now here I really got worried, because on the 3rd day I was put on KP like everybody else. I went into that kitchen at something like 5 in the morning, and then I didn't get out till 8 o'clock at night. And here I'm going to be at Fort Dix, and I could see myself in that kitchen fully KP for the God knows how long I'm going to be there. I said, "Sergeant Chereau, I'm not completely unfamiliar with the military. I was in high school ROTC, and I had 1 term of ROTC in college, a summer term, and I know about close order drill. I know about firing the weapons. I know about the various tactics and such. So I'm not completely strange. Maybe you can do something with me." And Chereau says, "Well, that's nice to hear. I think I'll make you an acting gadget." "What's an acting gadget?" He brought out a armband put the armband on me, and it had corporal stripes. He said, "Don't let this go to your head. You're not a corporal yet. You're not going to get paid as a corporal. But when those new recruits come in, you form them up and you march them to the movies to see those two movies. The first one was Why We Fight. Very good propaganda film, but excellent. The other one is How to Avoid Venereal Diseases. I saw that film more than anybody else in the United States Army. Anyway, and some of them passed out. It was so graphic, that film. Anyway, I was happy that I had a different job than KP. And I was in the reception center for 3 months while the FBI finally cleared me. And I was on orders to my basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia. And a couple of weeks after that, they took me into Columbus, Georgia, the Middle District Court, and they swore me in as a U.S. citizen. And boy, was I proud. I patted myself on the back. Nobody else was there to do that. And I really enjoyed it because I knew now I was no longer an enemy alien. I was just like everybody else. I was a U.S. citizen. And that I was never going to lose. Never. And I'm still proud this day, believe me. Anyway, after my basic training, what was needed was infantry. This was really a ridiculous thing. The basic training was in the ASTP program, Army Specialized Training Program. The people there had had some college education, and they were going to go back to college, get a college degree, and then be officers in the Army. Well, it would have taken me at least 3 years to get the degree, and this was 1943 plus 3 is 1946. In retrospect, wasn't that ridiculous? Well, before the term was over, somebody else realized it was ridiculous. And instead of going to college, we all went to the infantry. I went to the 87th Infantry Division for advanced infantry training. Well, this was sort of too bad because had I been in a regular basic training class, they would have realized I spoke German and I would have been one of the Ritchie boys. I don't know if you heard of the Ritchie boys, but that's what I would have been. But I was passed by and I was now in the infantry. Well, things happen that you don't predict. And what happened here is I was on a demonstration team for gas attack because the Germans had used gas in World War I. We weren't going to be caught short. And the instructor wanted to make it more realistic, and he threw a grenade that was thought was a smoke grenade, and he threw it and ended up being white phosphorus. Well, I was lucky I had my gas mask on, and it hit me around the ears. It hit me on my hands and my wrists, and the instructor got a smack in his face because he didn't have a gas mask. And then I went like mad to the dispensary. My pack had caught fire, and I got rid of that on the way. And they didn't know what to do with me when I first came in. And then the instructor came in, and he said, he realized what it was. He said, white phosphorus. And that's when they put my hands in the buckets and applied compresses on my ears. I was in the hospital for one good month. 1 good month of hospitalization. Wow. But by the time I got back, the people in training had progressed from a 5-mile full field march to a 25 field march. And about 15 miles, that was about as far as I could go. They had to take me back with a Jeep. So I wasn't their best soldier. Not being their best soldier, I was picked out as an infantry replacement, which they had to shed because of the invasion, the losses that they had at that time. And I was shipped out from the 87th as an infantry replacement. I went to England, and you would think they need me badly and this would move fast. It didn't. I'm in the replacement stream. We spent at least 3 weeks in England, and then we went across the Channel on a Liberty ship, got onto assault boats on these ladders. It was quite a hazardous transfer from one boat to the other in mid-Atlantic there on the Channel. And anyway, but when we got to the beaches, they had already built a small dock, so I never got my feet wet. But I could see in the beaches all the debris that was left from the invasion, of how horror that must have been. All that stuff laying around, you could just see how that must have been a horrific battle that was going on, and the residue was all still there.
That was
Utah Beach,
okay.
Utah, yes, and near Carentan. Yeah, because the railroad was in Carentan. I remember we got on there, and then we went through France, and that took a while, and then we got into Belgium, and that took a while, and then suddenly they realized I was already in Foxholes in the replacement depot up on the line when they realized I spoke German. So they took me and brought me back to Le Vesonnet near Paris for a 2-week course to make me an intelligence agent. The 2-week course was things taken from the Richie Boy course. And here I am, well-trained, intelligent agent, fully trained, wearing US, no longer my PFC stripe. I was the same as the captain and the lieutenant as they placed me into this interrogator prisoner of war team number 66 with 2 officers, 2 interpreters wearing US, and no rank, and 2 enlisted men, 1 non-commissioned officer in charge, and 1 driver. The driver was a T5, which was 1 rank more, like a corporal. But he didn't know what my rank was, and I always ordered him around. He didn't know he outranked me. Anyway, and I never told him, of course. So we were this team, and we were attached to T4's 12th Army Group, right under Bradley. General Bradley was our superior officer, and T4's was charged to go into the big cities along with the infantry and have building targets and personality targets. Building targets, anything that was of use to the force and anything that was needed in support of prosecuting war criminals. And the personality targets were the war criminals, of course. That was the mission of T4's. So we went through Luxembourg, where we got our orders, and that's where T4's headquarters was located. Then back into Belgium, and we got into Belgium. It was around the 1st of December. On the 10th of December, the Battle of the Bulge. Well, I think it was the 16th of December. The Battle of the Bulge started, and that was the most frightful day in my life, really. Not because of the danger that I was in. There was no particular danger, really. But of all the rumors that were going around, the parachutists were there, Germans were around the corner. You could hear firing all around. What they were firing at, I don't know. And they put me out in the dark on an access road with the orders, don't let any Germans come in, and here's your rifle, and here's your flashlight, and that's it. And I get in the middle of the road, and the vehicle comes along. I said, halt, halt. He said, what the hell is going on? The driver says, I gotta make sure you know German. He said, if you're German, if I were German, you'd be dead. Get in a ditch over there. No, it's not a bad idea. So I get in the ditch over there, and I yell at the next vehicle, course, they don't hear me. They go right by me. I'm not doing my job. So I don't know what the heck to do. And here the rumors are flying about these parachutists and all the firing. Well, thank goodness around midnight, they draw me back in. We go into a blackout move towards Antwerp. Now, Antwerp was our goal, but we didn't know that Antwerp was really the goal of the Germans in the Bulge. They wanted Antwerp as the port to supply. But neither the Germans nor us ever got to Antwerp. We got to Namur, and there finally we got orders to do something. And that was, we needed to intercept Germans. There were 4 Germans in American uniforms in one Jeep that had penetrated, and there were a number of those teams that were penetrating and were causing problems in our back. They were blowing things up and doing all kinds of miserable things. And our job was to patrol throughout Belgium to see if we could intercept anybody like that. I remember Sine, Rochefort, Dinant, Namur, all these Belgium towns, Remouchon, and it all sounds like it's an easy job, but this was about as miserable as it could get because you had to have the windshield down. You couldn't shoot through the windshield. And even 25 miles an hour, the weather was just miserable. When you see Battle of the Bulge, the only thing that comes to my mind is the weather. It was either snowing or sleeting or freezing rain. It was coming down one way or another. And here we're going 25 miles an hour. And being just a PFC, I was in the back seat behind the captain, and the captain got really the brunt of it. And I got right behind him to be a little bit less exposed to the elements. But I never told him that, of course. But it really didn't help that much because it was just miserable. Now, we got to Dinant, and there an infantry roadblock had encountered one of those Germans before in a Jeep, and they had wiped him out with bazooka. We're not sure how they intercepted him, but they must have not known the password, and the way they answered, they must have realized these were Germans, and they just wiped them out. And we searched them, and all we found was dog tags, which we turned in because they were either prisoners or dead Americans. And it would be interesting to know where they got those dog tags from. And then they had some explosives and maps, but we couldn't find anything else of any intelligence value. And now, here's in retrospect, the funniest story of the war. It was not funny at the time. We're patrolling, and pretty soon we could see the captain to know where we were. He's looking at the map, he's looking around. He said, Captain, there's an infantry unit there. Let's stop there and ask him to tell us where we are. And he didn't want to do it. Finally, we convinced him to stop. He said, Cohn, come with me. And the 2 of us, we trudge up the hill, and we get to a lieutenant who had drug out a table from a farmhouse, and he had maps there. And all the captain had to say, hey, Lieutenant, give me a break, show me where we are. No. I'm Captain Rempel, Military Intelligence. Give me a briefing of the situation. Lieutenant looks him up and down. He wasn't impressed. He said, you know, we got reports of 4 Krauts in American uniform, and you guys are parading like that. You look just like it. So, of course, intelligence. He said, well, show us your intelligence identification. Oh, we never take those with us because if we should get captured, they should know we're in intelligence. We got our dog tags. But anybody can have dog tags. That's not. He said, what's the 5th general order? Well, if he had asked me, I would have come around right because these were drilled into us. 12th General Orders. Captain, he didn't know. I said, okay, who won the World Series? Captain looked at me. I looked at him. I didn't know. He didn't know. We didn't follow baseball. All right. What's the recite the Star Spangled Banner? Captain starts. Well, say, can you see dawn's early light? Now he's reciting it, not singing it, and he gets stuck. In the meantime, more and more people are coming around us, and the other interpreter down there, who had a heavy German accent, he had a background similar to me. He comes running up and says, "What goes on here?" Well, that's all I was needed. M1s came into my belly, and M1 in the captain's belly, and M1 into Flo's belly, and they get the driver and bring him up. We're now prisoners of war of the Americans, out in the cold with that dew coming down on us, miserable and cold and shivering, and all suspect. I didn't help my story. It didn't help either. Where were you born? In Germany. You know, yeah. This was not healthy. So we had visions of getting shot here. Well, it took them about 7 hours until they finally were able to convince themselves that we were legitimate. And the lieutenant tells the captain, "Get the hell out of here." And the captain comes and gets us, and he said, "I don't want anyone to say one word about this to anyone." "No, sir." Well, we came back to the CP. They had heard all about it. When they were checking on our veracity, they had told the story, and they would come and run out. "Hey, what goes on here? What goes on?" Never lived that one down. Well, that's the story of the bulge. Well, of course, around Christmas, suddenly the sky opened up and our planes started to fly, and we were cheering the planes. We were cheering them because we knew that was going to change the way that battle was going, and it certainly did. And it turned all around, and we no longer had a mission, and we assembled in a small village which was called Wrocław, near Liège in Belgium, awaiting for the move into Germany. Before the bulge, they had gotten into Aachen as the first German city, but they were thrown back, and we had no German city in our possession. And we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And you would think that we get some training during that time. It was about 2 or 3 months. No training. Now, the officers probably did get some training, but on the enlisted side, we got nothing. And it was a waste of time, except finally was able to get a shower. My first shower, I got into Liège. I got into that shower, and I stayed there for 20 minutes while people were yelling, "Get the heck out of there." I wouldn't move. I felt wonderful with that warm water coming down on me. And to this day, I will take my bath. I don't even take a shower. I take a bath because I never got that during the bulge. And I really enjoy, even as of today, thinking back how dirty I was and how wonderful it was to get that warm water over me.
Yeah.
Some things you never forget.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, it took a while, and I guess it was March when we started to move into the first city, and the first city for us was Cologne. Cologne was on the Rhine River, and as we moved towards Cologne, we could understand that the Germans had withdrawn to the other side of the Rhine River, but they were right along the Rhine River, and we were getting to the Rhine River on our side. And now we could see the cathedral in the distance, and it looked like it was perfect. Then we got real close. You could see there was damage to the cathedral, but there was a hotel that had been wiped out that was next to it. and there was a big hole that people were going into and coming out of. What was it? They had discovered a wine cellar uh, in that hotel, and they were dragging out the wine. And our sergeant, he thought, "Oh, this is wonderful," and he took one of the gas cans that we had and got rid of the gas into the tank and washed it out with water and went in and filled it with wine. Big mistake. A couple of days later, I think his Jeep overboiled and all he had was wine instead of water. And they were washing and with wine. They didn't have any water, and he got rid of that wine and got water back into that thing as soon as he could. Well, anyway, that was another story of the war. Uh, Now, our one of the first party targets was a concern that was located right at the edge of the Rhine, and we moved into and we parked the car behind the building. We thought that the Germans wouldn't see it, and we got into the building, and you could see the Germans had evacuated rather quickly. All kinds of debris was thrown, but the building was still in pretty good shape. We could report on that. It was usable for us. And we find one live thing in there. What was it? The canary bird. Well, we are admiring the canary bird. And the German said, we tried to give him some food, but there was plenty of food in there. The Germans had given him plenty of food and plenty of water. And as we were admiring, suddenly we hear a mortar shell coming across the Rhine. They must have spotted our Jeep when we came in, and it was over. And the way the mortars go, one over, one short, and one for effect. Well, first round we took off like mad. We got into that Jeep in the second round, and luckily it was short. We took off like heck, and sure enough, the third round would have been exactly where our Jeep was stationed. Now, this made quite an impression because this was different. Usually, artillery was very impersonal. You were either lucky or unlucky, but it wasn't really aimed at you. It was aimed at this one was aimed at me. They were trying to kill me. Took a completely different tone about the war. These people were out to kill me. Me. And I changed my whole attitude about the way the war was going because of that. Anyway, we made our report, and here is maybe the nicest story I have of the war. Now, we didn't have any personality targets because all the Nazis had, of course, withdrawn to the other side of the Rhine. So we assisted in the enforcement of the curfew. There was a curfew. Nobody was to be out after dark. And the driver and I, we were going out there, and in the distance we see a figure, and I tell the driver, go in pursuit. And he did, and he manages to corner this person against the wall, and it turns out to be a young girl. And I confront the girl, and I start in my German. She was all flabbergasted, American speaking in German. And she was flabbergasted anyway because here Americans are interceding with her. And I said, what are you doing after curfew? He said, well, we're hungry. What do you mean we? Well, she said, I live with another girl and a lady, and we had one ration card, but when the Germans withdrew to the other side of the Rhine, when the Americans approached it, the rations were out of the window, and our black marketing that supplemented our food, that dried up as well. So we haven't eaten for about 3 days, and we're hungry. And I'm trying to find a place where I might find some food. I said, this doesn't sound right. What do you mean? One ration card and the three of you? She said, well, she said, well, there was the person with the ration card was a Dutch lady, and she was sheltering us two girls, and we're Jewish. I almost fell out of the Jeep. You're Jewish? Yes, she said, we're Jewish, and she hid us for the last 2 years. And we were okay until the Americans came, but now we ran out of food. I said, get in the Jeep. We go to the address, and I remember that address, 49 Stadtwaldgürtel in Cologne. We get to the house, and sure enough, there's a British lady and another Jewish girl, about the same. They were about 17 years old. And the British lady confirms exactly what the girl had told us. And we had some rations in the Jeep. We gave them, and they were really hungry. They started on those immediately, and we were happy to see the meat. And the British lady said, you know, I'm so happy that the Americans came, because I was advised that I have cancer, and I don't know what would happen to me if I become unable to function, and here these two girls wouldn't be able to subsist anymore. So now that you're here, we're all saved, and I'm happy for that. And I told her, well, don't worry about the food. We'll take care of it. We took off. I got to headquarters, and there's Lieutenant Levy. I told him about the two Jewish girls and the Dutch lady, and he said, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of them." And I was satisfied. And about 3 days later, I wanted to go and see the girl again. Her name was Ellen. I remember her name, but I don't remember the last name. I don't remember any of the other names. Her name was Ellen, though. And I wanted to see Ellen. She was a cute little girl. We get to the house. There's a big off-limit sign. What the heck is that? Off-limits mean you can't cross the sign. And I told my driver that as a matter of fact, wasn't the driver, it was the other interpreter, Flo. I wanted to show Flo the two Jewish girls that I met. And we went back and saw Lieutenant Levy. I go in there, Lieutenant, what the heck, you're putting a little off-limit sign on there? That's terrible. Why did you do that? He said, well, calm down. I don't know what the heck you're talking about. All right. He gets in our Jeep. We go back. And of course, we go past the sign. We go into the house. And the Dutch lady and two girls, they hug us. And we were all liberators. And Lieutenant says, what about that off-limit sign? And the Dutch lady chuckles and said, Lieutenant, you did too good a job. I said, what do you mean? Well, we got the truck that you sent with all the food in the basement. That was nice. And pretty soon, another truck came with food. And then another, and then another. And the basement is full with food. And here trucks are still coming. And I didn't know what to do. And so next door, there was an infantry unit. I saw the captain, and I explained what had happened. He said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. That's how the off-limit sign came in. And the traffic stopped, and they had their full cellar of food, and they didn't get any more anymore. So everybody was real happy, which I think is a nice story of, first of all, the heroine, the Dutch lady who saved these two girls for 2 years with little food, but they were able to subsist. And then the generosity on the American side when they heard the story of how they wanted to help. And this was really a wonderful story. We started a registration program for before we were leaving Cologne, because things were all stationary because of the Rhine River. It was a real barrier, but we had captured one bridge, and there were traffic going across that bridge, but it was a slow process. So everything was at halt, and we started the process of um, registering the Germans who were left in Cologne. And I took the two girls first because they had no identifications at all, and they now had identifications from the Americans. So I was happy with that. And the Dutch lady came to me and said, "Can you help me? I heard about this wonder drug. Maybe that helps cancer. The drug is penicillin." Well, I didn't know that penicillin had no influence on cancer, but here this wonder drug. So I wrote my mother to see if she could send me some penicillin. I don't know what she thought when she got the letter about penicillin, but she put it in a package. And these packages had always had outside a listing of what was inside. So it said penicillin right out there. When I got the package about, a month or so later, we were nowhere near Cologne anymore, but I could see the package had been tampered with, and everything else, the bologna and whatnot, was in there. But one thing was missing: the penicillin. Somebody one needed the penicillin more than me, obviously.
Yeah.
But by that time, I also found out that penicillin wasn't going to cure any cancer, so it all became obsolete. Anyway, so much for Cologne. You want me to go on to some of the other cities?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, the next city was Dusseldorf, the other side of the Rhine. We had to stand in the reception area for going across the Remagen Bridge. And then finally it was our turn, and we got across the bridge fine. And it must have been about in the middle of that. But I think the 16th day, the bridge fell in. But in the meantime, they had built a parallel bridge, the engineers had, and it was continuous traffic. It wasn't even interrupted when it fell in. I don't know who got hurt in the process, or killed probably, but we had gotten across the bridge safely enough, and we got into Düsseldorf. Well, Düsseldorf, we had the first party called Stahlhof, and we assembled outside of Düsseldorf, and things were completely in disarray. Nobody knew what was going on, and one of the superior officers said, to my captain, send a patrol in to see if it's safe enough for us to go into Düsseldorf. And Captain tells Flo and me, get in the Jeep and take a look and see, can we get into Düsseldorf? But we approached Düsseldorf, and you could see that in the distance the buildings, and they were all with white sheets hanging out of windows. And we got closer, and there was a roadblock, and there were people scurrying around the roadblock, and we could see, looking closer, they were not building the roadblock. They were trying to disassemble the roadblock. They were trying to take all the stuff out, and they had already created a gap in the middle. And then finally somebody saw our Jeep, and they all scattered and went home, I guess. And we slowly moved in, and we went through the gap, and there was debris, and it hurt the tire. And we limped into a gas station, an Esso gas station that was right there. And I went back and got the owner, said, can you switch tires for us? I said, no problem. And, have you seen any Americans? I said, no, you're the first ones. And here I'm speaking German to him, and he was amazed. You Americans speak German? I said, no, not everybody. Anyway, uh, we got the tire taken care of, and Flo and I, we look at each other and said, we're not supposed to liberate Düsseldorf. Let's get the heck out of here and wait till the infantry comes. Now, they were probably in Düsseldorf from the other direction or so, but from our direction, nobody had come. And we waited another day before we moved into Düsseldorf. And one of the first priority targets was Stahlhof. Now, that was an international conglomerate bigger than US Steel. And I got teamed up with an economist, a CIC agent, counterintelligence corps agent. I was giving him as an interpreter to help him find out what's going on with Stahlhof. So at least they used the right people to make an assessment, because that was our job. We were not supposed to have a detailed report about all that they have, but just a report if you had something that's still workable and can be exploited, or something that can be discarded. And of course, this was still a workable type of thing. And we got to the Stahlhof, and all we could find was the janitor. And I asked the janitor if he can get a hold of any directors. He said, yeah, I'm in contact with about 5 or 6. He said, get them together this afternoon and we'll be back and we want to talk to them. We came back in the afternoon, and it was amazing. The building was still in pretty good shape, and there was a conference room on the second floor that was in perfect condition. As we entered, you could see the older Germans sitting there waiting for us, and they had left 2 chairs open at the head of the table for us. The janitor must have told them there were 2 people who wanted to see them. And the first thing they did was offer me a cigar, and I was smart enough to say, no, thank you. I would have choked on the darn thing. Anyway, we start off talking back and forth, and this is when I first realized that I was really not completely up to the job, because I didn't have the education that I should have had for this kind of job. He was using economic terms that I didn't know the English, I didn't know the German, I didn't know either one of them. Right. I only had a 7th grade German education, and my American education came to 1 summer term of college, which didn't have economics in it. So that's when I felt inadequate. I wasn't really up to my job, but I did the best I could. And the CIC agent understood what the problem was, and he tried to simplify everything so I could translate for him and get the point across. And what he wanted was an assessment of their assets in about 24 hours. And they said this would take us, to be accurate, about 6 months to do. No, we need something to hurry. We'll give you 48 hours, but do the best you can. And we came back in 48 hours. They had a report of all their various outlying assets that were still apparently able to work. And I never turned in a report at all, because somebody was always in charge. I was not in charge. I was always in the assisting group, and the one in charge had to make the report, and so did the CIC agent, and he made the report and sent it in. I'm sure it was.
Let me ask you a question. With regards to interrogation, what was the interrogation process like, in terms of, did you interrogating a Wehrmacht soldier as opposed to an SS soldier? When did this first take place? And
Okay, I can tell you that when we hit Frankfurt.
okay,
Frankfurt will give you a good description of
okay,
that. Well, Dusseldorf. Oh, one other thing happened in Dusseldorf. A third-party target. We were there for about 5 days or so. Was a telephone exchange, and Flo and I, at this time, we didn't need any great uh, experts. We just wanted to find out if the phone uh, exchange was still in working condition or if it was all wiped out. So we got to the phone exchange, and when he opened the door, they were still working like mad. It was fully staffed, and people were going back and forth. And Flo is a joker. He was always a jokester. And he turns to one of the operators and said, can you connect me with Berlin? She said, of course. She connects him, and he started to talk with the Berlin operator, and he had a Berliner accent. So it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then finally, he thought this was enough. And he said, do you know who you're talking to? And she said, no. He said, well, I'm not a German. I'm an American. That was the end.
wow,
We were now completely cut off. She tried to get back to Berlin, but that was impossible. It was no go. Well, when we went back and reported that, the telephone exchange became a first party target because it was really dangerous. 5 days or whatever it was after we had moved into the city, they still had communication with Berlin. They could have had all kinds of information flowing there. And God knows what did go back. But anyway, from then on, the telephone exchange became the first priority target. The next one was Siegen, a little town, industrial town. And I don't remember much of what was going on the targets, but there were two other incidents. The first one was that, let's see, there was a disturbance and some woman was screeching bloody murder. And I went, my driver and I, we went closer, said, what's going on? And apparently there was a Polish laborer who had aimed his rifle against this small family, a man, a woman, and a young kid. And he was ready to shoot him. He said that man was a guard of his labor camp. And the guy protested and said, no, 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 I would never was a guard. I'm a railroad official. And I said, well, you must have railroad identifications then. And he said, well, I didn't bring it with me. I didn't know we were going to need that. I haven't had a job here, God knows how long. And but I'm not a guard at the labor camp. Well, the Polish laborer was inebriated, and we didn't want to have an incident. So I gave him a pack of cigarettes, and he gave me his rifle, and the family took off. So we saved his life. I hope I did the right thing, but that was really the job. We weren't in the business of prosecuting war criminals right on the spot there. The other one was we again were enforcing curfew, and it was pitch black, and in the distance was clack, 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 marching feet, and the cleats, they were obviously German. So I stopped the Jeep, I got out, and I yelled in German, Teilung halt! And they stopped. I called the senior to come forward. It was a non-commissioned officer by the name of, no, I don't remember his name. Anyway, he said this is Volkssturm, the old and young people, and they were hungry. They had left their weapons in the forest, and they were trying to give up, and they're giving themselves up to me. I now have 50 prisoners of war. My head, what am I going to do with these guys? There was a POW camp up the street or just about a mile up and said, okay, follow the Jeep. And the best they could. It was pretty dark. I had a flashlight and I helped them a little bit marching. And they were marching right behind us. I got to the camp and I said, I got 50 Volkssturm to be turned in, and they hungry, they like to eat something. And the guy in charge says, I'm sorry, we're full. I said, what am I supposed to do with these guys? So, well, there's another camp about 3 miles up the road. Take them up 3 miles up the road. What the heck did I get myself into here? Oh, I lost all kinds of sleep. We march up to another 3 miles, and it starts to get light. And we get close to the camp. I said, we're not going to go through this again. So we pull up, and I tell the gate guard, get your officer. You got 50 Volkssturm coming up. They're giving themselves up to you, and they need to be fed. And we took off. And that was the end of my Volkssturm. And the next big city was Frankfurt. Now, we had some real high-priced first-priority targets. Frankfurt was a very important industrial city in there, and it also had a building from I.G. Farben that had been designated as the supreme headquarters for Eisenhower, and the Air Force had orders not to bomb the building, and they had apparently left it unbombed, and it should have been in good condition, and it was a first priority target, and we were ready to take it, and all of a sudden we were told, halt, halt, halt. We have a bunch of high-ranking officers here that have to be processed. They have to be screened to see who has got to be interrogated further because of possible war crimes and whatnot, and who can just be let go into a POW camp. So these have to be screened before you do anything else. So we sit down and start to get these people one after another. Most of them were general officers. They come and they get to attention because they don't know they're at attention in front of a Jewish PFC. All they see is the US, and a German speaker. And then we ask them what unit they are in and what their assignment was, and based on that and the identifications they have and the papers on them to see if it meshes what they say, and if they were in just a army unit that didn't have except a tactical mission, then they went to a POW camp. But if they were in the Waffen SS or any of the people in the regular army that had been detailed towards guard duty in concentration camps or something, that was different. So they had to be singled out, and we interrogated them on that basis. And most of them were able to go right into the POW camp. They were of no significant, they didn't appear to be of no significant value. I could have made a mistake here and there, but hopefully not. And here comes a major general standing at attention, and I ask him his name. He says, August Wilhelm von Hohenzollern. Light goes to my brain. Oh my God, what do I have got here? Von Hohenzollern is the aristocracy. And August Wilhelm is Prince Augi. This is the crown prince of the Kaiser. I stop it right there. I run back to the captain. I said, I got a big one. He said, who do you got? I got Prince Augi, the crown prince of Germany. He's a major general in the Waffen SS, and he definitely needs further interrogation. And he's beyond me. I said, I'll take care of it. And that was the end of my interface with Prince Aufi. They took him away immediately for further investigation. But it was because I was in German schools that I understood who I was talking to.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't have realized who was in front of them there, but they would have realized he was a SS, Waffen-SS Major General. He probably would have been sent for further interrogation anyway. Well, anyway, I felt proud that I was able to identify this guy.
Yeah.
Well, now there was a delay now for our first party, and we got rid of all these officers. We took off for the IG Farm building. Well, big mistake. We should have moved immediately because what had happened was the infantry unit had a number of these forced laborers that were liberated on their hands and didn't know what to do with them. And he put them in that building. And in the building, they had a rage against the Germans and took the rage out by smashing all the windows and taking the furniture and throwing it out, probably $1 million worth of damage. All this had to be replaced when it could have been all in perfect condition for Eisenhower, all because we were late and the infantry guy didn't know about what was going to happen to that building.
Frank, let me ask you a question about the interrogation process. Did you have to check to see if the soldiers had the O tattoo under their arm? Did you ask them to show you if they were in the SS?
What? I'm sorry.
I know that the SS had an O blood tattoo under their arm.
Oh yes.
Did you ask them? Did you first ask them?
Of course, we always check that. Yes,
so
the tattoos were checked, and when it didn't, and we didn't do that right away. We waited, and we wanted to see what the guy says, and then we said, "Pull up your sleeves and take a look." And if it jived with what the guy said, that was one thing. If it didn't jive, then we knew we really had a problem with this guy. And he had to have definitely further interrogation. And he was earmarked for lying and hiding whatever the hell he was hiding. But we never went into detailed interrogations. That was not our job. It was strictly an assessment of whether they needed more interrogation or whether they can be placed into a camp without further worry about them.
What was your first question? What was your first question to the German soldier?
Well, it all started with name, rank, and serial number and assignment. And then in the assignment, what was your last job assignment? You were in battle with the American unit or British unit or whatever, or you were detailed to rear area security, or you were detailed to assist in the guarding of laborers or concentration camps. So it could have been any of those things. In a sense, the tattoos were definitely helpful because the ones who were really lying didn't want to admit that they were in concentration camp businesses, and they definitely had to be SS and had to have tattoos on them. So if they lied right from the beginning and said, well, we just had duties with war and we found the tattoo, we knew immediately they were hiding something. Right. And we put a red tag on them for further investigation.
Okay. So now, in terms of handling the Waffen-SS as opposed to a Wehrmacht soldier, was there a difference in interrogation, in their attitude?
Very definitely, because most of the people in the Waffen-SS, unless we knew that particular unit was only involved in tactical operations, and we had lists of those units, and if they were on the list, they're the ones who went to the POW camp. But if they were in a unit that we didn't know what their mission was, or if we knew that unit was being used for some specific purpose that needed possible further discovery of war criminal activity, then they were tagged for further investigation. Yeah.
Okay.
But of course, the urge was to get rid of the chaff. Don't overwhelm us with people who have to be interrogated, and they don't really have any reason to be interrogated, because this takes too long. We can't waste our time on people who should be discarded. So the pressure was to discard as many as we could.
Right. What was your feeling like being in this position now of interrogating the Germans? Did the memory of your childhood, of the children who were bothering you in the classroom, ever come to the surface and say, now I have some control over something that I lost control over in my childhood?
Well, of course, I never admitted that I was born or brought up in Germany. My German was strictly, my parents were German and we spoke German at home. I never admitted to them that I was born in Germany because I thought that would compromise my position. And I think that was the right thing to do, actually, by just not getting into that I had any roots in Germany at all. But I knew what I was talking about, at least. And because of my background, I could tell better if they were honest or not, in what they were bringing about. I could ask questions and see how that answers were, if they fit in properly or not. But never admitted to them. Even after the war, when I had 3 more tours in Germany, in my association with all these German police people and whatnot, I never admitted that I was born in Germany. They never knew. The first time that I ever told any German was after I was out of the army in retirement.
Interesting. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so explain the going back home aspect after you returning back after the war back to America. What that's like to see a family.
Well, of course, when I first came over, I immediately wanted to shed everything German. I didn't want to have anything to do with German. My parents had contacts with, like they had a Breslau organization that they attended and made me go as a kid to attend. But the minute I was a little older, I would have nothing to do with it. And of course, after the war, I absolutely had nothing to do with German American except official type of associations where I was asked officially to help in, and they did have some American German, coordination that way, but never admitted to them that I was German.
Yeah. How did
on the American side, they didn't know either for that
Yeah.
matter. They just knew I spoke German.
Wow.
I didn't go into my background. If I was forced into it, then I would tell them, yes, I was born in Germany. If I was only 13 when I left, I have no contact after.
When you came back to America, you now reunited with your girlfriend and the girlfriend you called Pong. How did that take place?
Well, when I came back, well, let me wait and get you one more story, and that was at the Elbe River. After Frankfurt, and I didn't even tell you the whole thing on the IG Farm building. We had a explosive team to blow up the safes because we wanted to get in the safes. The safes have documents. IG Farben was the one that furnished the poison gas for the gas chambers, for example. So we blew up the safes and we got all the documents together and turned them in. And then there were industrial diamonds, and the explosive people, they kept the diamonds. And then there were stacks of marks, and we thought the marks were worth nothing. I know I had a stack like that. I brought back and gave souvenirs to the people in the headquarters who didn't have a chance to go out and see anything. Here, have a souvenir. So I gave away thousands of marks. They were worth 25 cents on the dollar, but I didn't know it. Well, anyway, that was Frankfurt. And then Wiesbaden, we liberated a Polish labor camp. And so that was a problem there, that half of the people were volunteers. They wanted to work for the Germans, and the other half were forced laborers who were drug in, who didn't want to leave work for the Germans. We were trying to separate those. It was impossible. Everybody was, I was forced labor. I was forced labor. This one, he was a volunteer. Well, the German was not fluent, and we couldn't tell who was lying. It was. We finally gave up, and we declared everybody was forced labor. So they were really given an exemption when indeed they should have been punished. But on the other hand, if they went back to Russia, we found out much later, after the war was over, there was one girl who had been who volunteered to go back and be repatriated in Russia. Well, they immediately shaved her hair and dishonored her, and then all the men, they were put in prison right away. So nobody, after when they heard that, nobody volunteered to go back to Russia anymore. But that was Wiesbaden. And then we were on the road to Kassel. And before we got to Kassel, they say, forget about Kassel, go immediately Magdeburg. Magdeburg is on the Elbe. The Elbe was the river designated by Eisenhower to separate the Russian and the U.S. forces. And we were to have a presence because the Russians had already arrived on the other side of the Elbe River. So we got to there, and the captain received a top secret map which showed the occupation zones, the boundaries of the occupation zones. And looking at the map, we could tell that Magdeburg was in the Soviet zone, and even areas further to the west were all part of the Soviet zone. So they were going to come across the Elbe River, and the captain got orders. Now, he didn't explain it to me, but I could tell what it was, that, hey, sure, you're going to take that area that we're in now, but not now. Wait a couple of months or so. When we withdraw, that's when you come across and take over. So stay where you are. And he's looking for a Russian speaker, can't find anybody. He says, Cohn, come with me. I'm trying to get out of this. He said, hey, Captain, I know one word, tovarish. That's it. Friend. That's all I know of Russian. And I don't care. Carry the map. Carry the map. And he orders a German boatman to take us across in mid-river. He gets up in the middle of the river, make sure they see it's an American coming. And we get to the other side. You can't imagine the reception we received. I mean, they hugged us, they kissed us, they carried us around. It's as if the two of us had liberated all of Western Germany there. And plied me with vodka. I was 19 years old. I had never had a glass of vodka, one sip, and I knew, no, this is not for me. But I had some cigarettes I could compensate. Of course, I was absolutely of no help to the captain. They had to take him to the back where they must have gotten him an interpreter. But me, I stayed at the river edge communicating with the Soviet forces there. And one NCO took a shot to me, said, me, Moscow. He said, me, New York. You come Moscow, you come New York. That's how we were communicating. Well, anyway, when we went back, we said about the reception, and it was months later when I finally woke up one day and it hit me. Why did we get such a reception? Well, it was very simple. When the Germans went into Russia, they mishandled the Russians very badly. They uh, they they really hurt them, and when the battle turned and the Russians started to advance, they were taking their revenge. So the Germans didn't want to be taken prisoner by the Russians in any way or shape.
Yes.
So they fought every inch of the way. So the Russians, when they were approaching the Rhine River, had to fight all the way up to the edge of the river, while we knew the war was over when we were going from towards Magdeburg. On both sides of the Autobahn, the Germans were converging, trying to give up to us because they were hungry. They wanted to be taken prisoner. I know you were shooting at us, so we knew the war was over. But the Russians, when they finally saw an American coming, that's when they realized there were no more Germans in front of them, and they had survived the war.
Yeah.
So they were celebrating their own survival. That's why we got such a reception.
Yeah, I've seen some of the videos from the war. Yeah. George Stevens, I think, the producer, filmed the Elbe River. People,
most of them was at Torgau.
Torgau.
That was the first place where it happened. We probably had contact about 2 days later up at Magdeburg.
What were your impressions of the Soviet soldiers?
Well, we were impressed with them. I mean, they were hardened soldiers. You could tell they had suffered through the war, and they had survived it, and they were definitely relieved that this thing was over.
Yeah.
We had respect for them. Yeah.
And so after this meeting at the Elbe, where did you go?
Oh, and then I had to stay over for another year in the occupation, and I got promoted to staff sergeant, and I ended up shipping back with prisoners of war, helping me documentation in support of the prosecution of war criminals. I went back to the States, traded and such, and that was my job. And then the other job was sergeant of the guard for the outer perimeter of prisoners, of important prisoners designated for trial. We thought we had Goering in there. We didn't have Goering. Goering was in the first Nuremberg trial. They were in Berlin. We had the people, and we didn't know who we had. We had the people who were concentration camp commanders and deputies to the primary Nazis. They were in the second Nuremberg trial. They were in Oberursel being guarded by us, but we didn't know who we had. I found that out much, much later. Anyway, those were my jobs in the occupation. And then I came back and went back to City College, and I was in the reserve because I was happy with my promotion. I stayed in the reserve, but I went to college, and Paula Hong was in the college. We reestablished it, and about a year later, I convinced her to elope with me. It was funny. We came back after we got married. We didn't have a place to rent because there was a housing shortage. And it took me 3 weeks before I finally found a miserable little place that we could move into. But in the meantime, we went back to each other's homes and didn't tell them that we were married until we had that one place that I finally rented. And then we moved into there and we told, hey, we've been married for 3 weeks.
Oh, that's excellent.
And Paula's mother was furious for at least 48 hours. And my mother was sort of sad that I didn't bring her into the equation, but I
Yeah.
didn't want to do that when Paula couldn't tell her mother. So,
What a, what a,
but
what a,
anyway, we got married. We stayed married for 72 years.
God bless you.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know. I uh I admire I admire and I'm inspired by your journey, your resiliency and your good-heartedness, your ability to remain a human being
Well, that was one thing that I always told myself. Don't ever be like them. You know, we weren't going to be like them. I wasn't going to be like them. So my contacts were always correct. That's what we were allowed to do. We weren't going to be overly generous, and we were not going to take out our hate or retribution. We're going to do it just by the numbers. And that worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
And I was not a German, so they had no line towards me one way or another. I just spoke the language, and boy, are they happy to have somebody who spoke the language. I was always welcome. And they knew I was Jewish. I mean, my
Yeah.
name, Cohn, is obviously Jewish, but we never discussed it. We just never had a discussion
What
because I didn't want to know how badly they were involved because now I had official requirements with them, and if they were as bad as that they should have been prosecuted, that would have been a different story. But I never found that out on any. One other thing I should tell you, and that is, I never knew while I was still overseas of how bad the Jews suffered in the Holocaust. I learned that when I finally got back to the States. And then I found out that my extended family, 11 people had been killed, and they had been dispersed through 7 countries. So that family was never able to be reconstructed, reconstituted.
Yeah.
It was decimated. Yeah.
You just celebrated your 98th birthday this past August.
Yes, that's right.
What do you attribute your longevity to?
Well, I actually lived a pretty clean life. I never smoked, for example, and I drank alcohol for a while, a little bit here and there, but lately I haven't touched the stuff because of the medication, and the medication made all the difference because my father died at age 60 of a heart attack, and my mother at age 62 of a stroke. But I had uh, lower blood pressure. I had high blood pressure, and I would have died somewhere around there too. But the medication controlled that, and that definitely helped me stay. And the healthy life. And then I do exercise every day, even this morning. I took my stretching exercises, and then I usually walk at least 2,000 steps every day at a minimum, and that keeps me going. And I feel pretty good most of the time,
Yeah,
not all the time.
well, no, I understand that, but just hearing your story and the clarity that you're able to express yourself with, and the ability for you to recall the past and to
Yeah.
be able to
Well, it's
share it.
still in there. So I
Yes.
haven't had a stroke yet that impacted.
No, I understand that. But now did you ever have the desire to return back to Breslau?
Not really. I never did. I never tried. Uh, I lost complete interest in it. First of all, they didn't want me there. So why should I want them? And secondly, it turned Polish. There's no such a thing as Breslau.
Right.
It's Wrocław. And I don't know Polish at all. And it would be difficult. I would rather visit Warsaw than Wrocław, really, if
Yeah.
I was going to go to Poland. and I never had any real desire to go to Poland in the first place. And I certainly didn't have a desire to go back to Breslau.
If you could, if you,
Well, now would be different. I would go as an interest matter, but now it's too late. I couldn't manage that.
did you ever have a connection to the displaced persons camps in Germany, the DP camps?
Oh yes, DP camps I visited at the time, but not concentration camps.
No.
That I did after the war when I was assigned to Germany. Then I went to Dachau and saw that and so forth. But at the time of the war and the occupation, I never had any contact with the camp except the Wiesbaden labor camp,
Yeah.
which we sort of liberated.
My father and my grandparents were in the displaced persons camps in Ulm and Fehrenwald in South. And they left Russia and repatriated to Poland. And then from Poland, they were snuck out by the Breka. And the Breka took them, as my father, who now tells me he was on the back of one of the Breka soldiers who told him, don't make a sound. They had to run past the road to the other side, past the Soviet soldiers. So I was interested in knowing if you were you after the war in the DP camps to see the displaced people?
Yeah, well, I did see displaced. I saw a couple of them. I don't even remember where they were.
Okay.
But it was already past the time that it was a big deal. You know, they already had settled down into some routine, and they were just waiting for whichever they were going to go. Some were going to America, some were going to Israel,
right?
But everybody had a destination, but and nobody wanted to stay there, but they had to stay there until it all cleared up. Yeah. We understood that, and whenever we went, we tried to bring some cigarettes because cigarettes was really what somebody always needed for barter purposes. Everything was done with cigarettes.
If Frank, if you could leave the audience with a lasting message about your experience or about inspiration, about life, maybe you can share that with us.
Well, of course, we kind of thought after the war that anti-Semitism was no longer in the mode. Anti-Semitism really started to be hidden in the back alleys. Nobody would admit that they were an anti-Semite, and we kind of thought we had conquered this business to some extent. And here we suddenly wake up in the year 2023, and we find we have a bunch of people who are just as bad as the Nazis were. They were committing the same type of stuff that the Nazis were doing. They were killing babies. They were killing old people. They were raping women. They were misusing mankind in a way just because they were Jews. And we thought we had conquered this, and we haven't. So it's been a terrible, terrible disappointment because basically we didn't move one step further than when we were when the war started.
Yeah.
So I do not have any inspirational things to say at this point. I am deeply, deeply disappointed.
Yeah. Well, on an individual journey from an individual journey of your life is very inspiring to me as a human being, not just because I'm having this interview with you and placing you on my channel, but the fact that a one-to-one individual who experienced life's history and is still alive to tell it in the first person is truly inspiring and a very enlightening experience. And so I thank you for joining me today and giving me this opportunity to talk with you.
Sure.
You're a blessing.
Happy to do that. And I always thought that this would help show people that we as Jews are just like everybody else, and there was no need to hate us for any reason. And I always tried to have a decent life and do the right thing at the right time, and uh, set an example that way, to be a good Jew and a good human being. And I hope that this would be infectious and would be with others who had similar experiences, we would be able to put this across, that this anti-Semitism is just something that is in the past. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
it didn't end that way.
I wanted to ask you one more question before we close.
Okay.
And did you ever have a connection to a spiritual connection? Did you ever have a desire or feeling of this? Were you raised this way or no?
Oh, I made a poem once that sort of showed. Let's see if I have it available. Yeah, I do have it available. It's not that long. I can read it, and I
Yes.
think you can see at the end of what I end up. Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
I wrote this. The Chosen People is the title. It all got started in Germany. With hate, the Nazis got tough. We Jews were placed in jeopardy. That should have been enough. At first, the Jewish economy, with a legislative shove, was strangled without ceremony. That should have been enough. Out with our government leaders. With teachers, they got rough, ignored by worldwide readers. That should have been enough. They singled out our writers. Get rid of that Jewish stuff. Our books they burned with their lighters. That should have been enough. On Crystal Night, they wrecked our homes. Our synagogues were snuffed. They beat us, jailed us, broke our bones. That surely was enough. The war, escape was ended, but their plans got fired up. A final solution was surrendered. That surely was enough. They drove us into the ghettos. They made us a wretched lot. Hardly a bread or potatoes. It surely was enough. The train then started moving to concentration camps when life and death decisions were made on the railroad ramps, with gas where we thought there were showers, like chickens are killed in a pen, surrounded by wire and towers, our children, our women, our men. Where were you, God? What was your part? Why were the chosen us? Toward what end, we ask you, Lord, were 6 million souls enough?
Wow. Very powerful. Beautiful, beautiful.
It says
Yeah.
what I think.
Well, I honor those words, and I honor the creativity of you to put the words and your emotions on paper. Thank you.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure talking to you.